The Christmas Beast by Jim Nichols. Whenever Christmas season rolls around, I begin to recall the variety of Christmas programs I have both seen and been a part of. We used our baby for the baby Jesus once, even though she was a girl, at least a bald one. We have had plays indoors and outdoors, but there will never be another Christmas program like the one where we put together an animal act. The idea was bold enough. Someone, though no one wants to claim the credit for it now, suggested we do a multimedia presentation involving slides, a recording, acting, and a live animal to make things more exciting. Bringing a dog to church, or even a lamb for Christmas, you can understand. But we were thinking big that year. Besides, the script we had together called for a donkey, not a lamb or dog. When we started the filming for the multimedia presentation outside, we should have anticipated some of the problems that might be forthcoming. The donkey was photogenic enough, as were actor and actress done up and dressed up to look like Joseph and Mary. But the donkey was in heat, and there was a horse who begged for a role that didn't belong in a family-oriented program. Fact of the matter, we had trouble keeping him from photobombing the slide presentation. People gave thought to the problems that could come from bringing a live donkey onto the front platform in the sanctuary. They laid huge pieces of cardboard along the carpet where the donkey would walk, just in case the donkey laid some huge pieces of her own. That problem being addressed, they went on with the show. Chet Herndon had the role of the old man on the stage who introduced the donkey, and Michael, the little boy who led her onto the stage. He also had the responsibility of trying to keep the animal quiet during the multimedia presentation. No one thought of trying it all the way through during the dress rehearsal. That's what we all noted during the debriefing for the insurance company later on. The donkey did fine all the time the actors recited their lines during the dress rehearsal. She even stood still when the recordings were played a little too loud over the sound system the first couple of times through. She stood quietly and was willing to walk wherever Michael led her on cue. But things changed when the house lights went out and the projector bulb went on. A frightened lamb is manageable. It just stands there and trembles a lot. It doesn't make much noise at all. A frightened dog makes more noise, but even it can be controlled better than a frightened donkey. When the house lights dimmed and the projector came on, the donkey tried to bolt for what looked like an exit door. Actually, it was the door to the minister's study, and that's where most of the damages were contained. The books were hardly hurt at all, but the shelves they were on and the minister's desk could hardly be given away at the next rummage sale. It actually almost saved the Christmas program to have the donkey back in the minister's study for a rampage. But all hope of saving it ended when the projector went out and the house lights came back on. Chet said a few more lines, and then he was to let Michael lead the donkey back on out. By this time, Michael was too intimidated to try to hold the donkey by the reins, so Chet led the donkey. And that was good for Michael, too, but Chet was to regret it a long time after. The nervous beast stayed still for a portion of the program. You have to give her credit for some things. The presence of people up front helped to provide for her continued presence on the platform for the rest of the dramatic presentation. She seemed finally to have gained her composure once she realized she would not be permitted to leave until her cue had come. The projector light did not harm her, and the sound of the blowing fan in the projector bulb became common enough almost to lull her to sleep. Once she had time to think of it, the donkey really didn't want to go back outside. After all, it was much warmer in the church building than at the corral. Not even the Christmas stable could afford the luxury the beast found in that church building. That's why she balked when Chet tried to lead her off stage. If you have ever had the misfortune of trying to get a balking donkey going when she has decided to stay, You know what a problem Chet had. He pulled on the reins. Nothing happened. He grabbed an ear in the reins. The beast dug in her heels and refused to move. Several of the ladies gasped, but Mrs. Herndon absolutely fainted at what happened next. Chet slapped the donkey on her flanks, and the donkey did more than simply balk. She kicked. She swung a hoof up and caught Chet in such a way that he couldn't gasp like Mrs. Herndon. He just looked pitiable and turned ghastly white. Then he began to moan slowly, and the minister came to his feet as Chet slowly rolled over onto the floor. The minister suggested it was time to pray. In the meantime, the donkey emphasized her decision to remain on the platform by sitting down and munching on a potted poinsettia decorating the front. I'm not sure the plants are that delectable an item, but it seemed to be the beast's method of emphasizing her determination. The preacher's suggestion that we all pray had the poorest possible timing imaginable. Nobody was about to bow the head and close the eyes with the greatest entertainment of the year going on up front. The whole crowd had taken a serious lesson from Chet, and they knew two things. First, they knew something had to be done quickly to get the beast out of the sanctuary before someone else got hurt. Secondly, they knew they didn't want to be the somebody who did that something for fear they would be the someone else who got hurt. Ernie McAllister was the guy who ran the projector. He was somewhat creative, but proportionately short on common sense. That's why he was operating the projector rather than trying to control a live animal on the platform. But with Chet sidelined and a job begging to be done by a creative sort of adventurer, Ernie grabbed up all the extra extension cord he could manage and began to mobilize the slide projector, which had initially sent the donkey on a rampage in the preacher's study. The thought of Ernie McAllister driving the balking donkey out of the sanctuary with one of his harebrained schemes was enough to create a major panic. Up to this point, everyone had stayed seated in spite of everything that had gone wrong. A few stood up when the preacher suggested everybody pray for Chet Herndon as a diversion, but they sat right down again once the preacher hurried through with a few words that nobody noticed and said, Amen, at the end. This time, however, people started a massive evacuation effort. It began principally up near the poinsettia plants, particularly in a line between Ernie McAllister and the stubborn animal. But once everyone saw what Ernie was up to, it was as if a fire alarm had sounded. The mad rush of the capacity crowd trying to vacate the building before Ernie could get to the donkey with the projector actually brought everybody a little time. As it was, somebody tripped over the cords, and Ernie couldn't do a thing until people were out of the aisles and he could plug the projector back in. By the time he did that, everyone else was gone. Everyone except Chet Herndon, who was in no condition to hurry out the door, and a couple other brave trustees who realized they would be legally responsible for whatever damages might still be inflicted on church property. Ernie slowly approached the donkey with the darkened projector in hand, ready to drive the rampaging beast out the side door. One of the trustees had already worked his way over there and opened the door. It would all now hinge on how well Ernie's plan worked. It didn't. Ernie had worked his way in too close. The moment the bright light came to life, so did the donkey's hooves. One or two quick kicks, and the projector's days of bright lights were over. Ernie fell back in defeat and had no other plans for evicting the Christmas beast. He was now more focused on a minimal plan called survival. Now that Ernie could no longer use the projector, one of the trustees figured he didn't need the string of extension cords either and proceeded to fashion a whip of them. Reach the kicking distance and give him the opportunity to drive the dangerous donkey from the church building. It didn't do that much good. Not only could the donkey kick, she could charge. That lesson learned, the two trustees decided they could assess damages to the property later on, and they also vacated the building. In the meantime, Someone had the foresight to call the police to come in and defuse the escalating violence at the church building. That might have worked for a mad dog, but this is the first time the local constable had been called to deal with a rampaging donkey in a church building. Essentially, as two police officers entered the meeting house, they ended up learning what everybody else had already learned about not letting the donkey kick and not aggravating her into charging. The best they were able to do while they were in the building was to assist Chet Herndon out the door so he could be driven to the emergency room. Outside, the police began to deliberately handle the donkey the way they normally would do in a mad dog scenario. Several objections were raised, including the trustees who properly reasoned how difficult it would be to clean up and move the carcass of a slain donkey from the already damaged premises. Naturally, the minister and several ladies were still sympathetic to the frightened donkey. After all, the poor critter was simply out of her habitat. Michael, the young boy who was supposed to lead the donkey around while the whole thing was still merely a play and not the out of ordinary drama it had become, had quietly gone home for a package of apples and was now back with his simple solution. He gingerly laid an apple on the back pew near the door and backed out. The donkey sniffed curiously and slowly approached the offering. Upon deciding it was not some other harebrained scheme, like the projector or the lamp cord whips, the donkey quieted down and ate the apple. Michael came back in and set another one in the same place. The donkey liked the apples enough that the third one offered was held just a little ahead of her to coax her outside. Michael set it on the sidewalk, and the Christmas beast came out to munch on it there. Everybody wanted to cheer, but they were also timid about setting off another episode. A halter was slipped over the donkey as she went for the fourth apple, and the drama ended as the donkey was led away to its accustomed environment of a barn and corral. Everybody went back into the church building to gaze upon the assorted ruin there. The minister suggested everybody dismiss with a prayer and recited the passage from the Bible where it was prophesied, "A little child will lead them." It was appropriate, especially considering that the event being celebrated at Christmas was the coming of Messiah as a baby. Damages were extensive, but at least the insurance company owned up to paying for them. After all, they hadn't restricted church programs to exclude having live animals indoors before this episode anyway. All churches insured by the company did get a new rider with their policy renewals, which changed the things excluded for churches after this episode. Indoor donkeys were no longer covered. That means there have been no Christmas programs since this one, which came anywhere near where this one came. And for all the cameras that normally catch pictures of little ones picking their noses on the platform when they were supposed to be reciting lines, not one picture was taken to verify all this happened. Not one picture. You'll just have to take the word of everyone who was there that night. They'll be talking about it for years to come.